The quality of life in Lowell has improved over the past 20 years, and I think the symbol of it is the fact that the river itself is cleaner, and the river is usable. It's a wonderful space for people to walk and to play. 20 years ago, people didn't walk along the Merrimack River. Now you go out there and you have to jostle for a space on the walkway. And I think that's symbolic of how we've improved the life of all of us in the city.
In the mid-1960s, the people of Lowell, Massachusetts were suffering through their fifth straight decade of high unemployment, urban decay, and economic depression. Lowell's grim situation qualified it for many of the new anti-poverty and community development programs initiated during this period. One of these was Model Cities, a federal urban development and beautification program designed to give people a meaningful role in the revitalization of their community. In Lowell, the effort began in a neighborhood called the Acre.
One of the problems in Lowell at that time, in 1967, was that people, particularly those in the Acre, had a very low concept of themselves as a result of the poor economy. Many of the people were not that well educated, had subsistence level jobs. There was not that much encouragement for the children to go on to higher education. And it was because of that that the education component of the Model Cities program focused on bringing exciting education and special programs to the children, retraining teachers, and doing all that was possible to improve the education of the children in the Acre.
The founders of Human Services Corporation continued the work of the Model Cities program and its citizen participation group, the Acre Model Neighborhood Organization. They were inspired by the ideas of Patrick J. Mogan, an educator and planner who envisioned using the entire city as a learning laboratory.
The imagination that Pat had in putting together a systems approach to solving a city's problems was so unusual in terms of a long-range goal that when one looked at it and said, gee whiz, you know, this is just really a phenomenal opportunity that requires an enormous effort, a terrific effort behind it in order to make this thing happen.
Years ago, when you heard Pat Mogan talking, you could almost you would get the feeling that anything could happen. And I remember I heard him so many times, and very often the same thing over and over again. And yet I would, when he finished talking, I always felt a little more inspired.
What we were trying to do in Lowell was interdisciplinary. It was beyond the capability of any single agency. So we had to find a place where all of the various agencies could come together and get involved in this particular process. If you put it under any one particular operating agency in government or in the private sector, that would become the dominating factor and the other ones would become subordinates.
We were looking for a name, and I always, and even though human services is very widely used now, it was not that common a term at the time. And Pat Mogan used it an awful lot. And I always used to kid him and say, as opposed to inhuman services. And then when we were thinking about a name for the thing, and I said, well, we posed some names. I said, well, why not? We're talking about human services. Why not Human Services Corporation?
The pivotal role the corporation played in establishing an urban park based on Lowell's heritage is its most notable achievement. The idea evolved from plans for an educative city, which was seen as a means of economic, educational, and cultural renewal.
I was convinced that schools, as presently organized, were only about maybe a 20% factor in achievement, and your home and your neighborhood and peers, depending upon whether they were considered positive or negative factors, were the 80% factor. When we came to the conclusion that the key to our success, meaning to give us a good address, to give a sense of positive feeling, and eliminate the alienation and disassociation that was going on, we knew that depended upon if we could find something of substance in what we were and what we are as a stepping stone into the future. Well, while we're in that particular process, Dr. Michael Southworth from MIT and his wife, Dr. Susan Southworth, both architects and both historians, helped us come up with the theme that Lowell actually is a living exhibit of the process and the consequences of the American Industrial Revolution.
Early plans outlined a multi-purpose organization called the Center for Human Development, which would integrate various community resources and support personal and social renewal.
Even the Center for Human Development, from that grew the Urban National Park idea. How do you take the environment and make it a classroom, a living classroom for people?
We were pretty well convinced that you couldn't go from a classroom to the city as a whole. So we had to find a transitional classroom. The transitional classroom was the Lowell Draycott Forest.
At that time, when we spoke of environment, it was kind of a catchword for the being out in the forest. And we would say, no, 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 the environment is anywhere where you're at and what's around you. And we were thinking in terms of ecological impact and how you interact and all of those kinds of things. And so then, well, we just took it one step further and said, hey, listen, why can't you have a national park in the city? Who said you have to bring a national park near the city, or the city has to be near the park? Why can't the city itself, or part of it, be a national park?
In 1972, the Lowell City Council approved the historical park concept as the centerpiece of the city's future development. HSC worked with community leaders in the public and private sectors to develop and promote plans for parks at the state and national levels.
We were convinced that that goal, if things fell into place and if we got the cooperation we needed, that it could be achieved. We also knew that we couldn't do it by ourselves. We knew we didn't have the funds, we didn't have all of the expertise, we could not do it by ourselves.
The thing about the park that made it very optimistic was that from the very beginning, Brad Morse, as our congressman, embraced the idea. And then it seemed that we just fell in succession. Every congressman that came in there, from Cronin to Tsongas to Shannon, you know, to Atkins, that just loved the idea and saw it as something that was both a good idea and politically a good idea.
At the state level, Governors Sargent, King, and Dukakis supported the development of the Lowell Heritage State Park, established in 1974. The national park followed in 1978.
Since there was that kind of active effort to get and it was a continuing effort to get the federal funding, and it looked scary at times with budgets and all that sort of thing, but we always had the support and the encouragement of these other folks, so that I think had we thought it would depend on local funding, we'd have been discouraged.
The reason it was picked up by many people was very, down and dirty economic. People very quickly saw that if this concept were going to fly, and it did fly, that there were lots of things that could be done for the city and the people in it in a different way, coming away from, not that they would deny the validity of the original philosophy, but I think they saw a way to get away from urban renewal as we knew it in the 50s and in the 60s, and to do something different.
Historic Preservation magazine describes Lowell as the premier rehabilitation model for gritty cities worldwide. The positive impact of the state and national parks is indisputable. A prime example is the overwhelming success of the annual Lowell Folk Festival. Looking back, HSC members believe certain aspects of the process were crucial.
I think the critical piece of a community change process that's as all-encompassing as what we were envisioning is the idea that you provide a safe arena where people can think and tinker. And most of all, an environment in which people are encouraged to drop their old paradigms, to take the risk of not depending on old paradigms as the way to solve problems, to let go of all of those just long enough to let the creative juices flow, to let the interactions do their thing so that creative solutions can be brought forward, and then to have the courage to pursue a different paradigm.
I think it's fundamental to view these relationships, whether it be with the local municipality or the federal and the state, or some quasi-agency or a neighborhood or an organization or just the ordinary person in the community who has the same goal. I think you have to look at it as a partnership, that everyone is equal, that everyone has a right to their opinion and their suggestions, and you put it all on the table and you view it. We're going to solve this and we're going to do it as partners.
From the beginning, Human Services Corporation was committed to building concrete economic and social programs that would instill a sense of hope and determination in area residents. Among HSC members, there is still a sense of unfinished business and a belief that their original concept for the park has yet to be fully realized.
I would hope that it would always have the support of people who are local in commitment, in origin, and that would give it a real local substance. It's not something that's to be managed like a Disney World kind of environment. It's more than that. And I think Pat Mogan emphasizes it, and I would lend my voice to that emphasis, that greater development and dimension has to be given to the human side of what it is that we call the urban national park, of what it is that we call the educative city, of what it is that we hope the Center for Human Development would be, of what it is that magnet schools should do, of what it is that thematic schools should be like. What are we talking to? We're talking about people, for people, of people, by people. And I think that that's what the substance of it has got to become. We've got that much more work to do, and I don't think we're there yet.
In order to do anything of substance again, you have to have that neutral ground where people can think and plan and develop, and also work under the realization that some of the bright minds in this country are the bright young people who could be part of this urban laboratory and have an awful lot to contribute. And we provided that for them at one time, and I think we should provide it for them again.
The people of HSC see the result of their work. Lowell has been transformed. But beyond the community benefits, they also find personal satisfaction.
Physically, the city is looking much better. I think the amount and type of community participation in municipal affairs is at a much deeper and more inclusive level than it was 20 years ago. I think it's a much more fun place to live.
And I can look around and say, I had something to do with that, and if I had not been there at that time when the Model Cities program was being written, if we hadn't spent weekends and nights working on those proposals, if we hadn't been there to start Human Services, I sincerely believe, I truly believe, none of the parks would be here, neither the national nor the state parks would be here today.
When we were developing our Model City program, when we were talking about the thing that we were asking was a process that was going to take time to develop, we utilized the words of historian William Bundy. And Bundy said, every great civilization, I say every great city, had one thing in common. That's a positive sense of the future, infusing the present with a sense of purpose, hope, and expectation.